Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're continuing with our series on Bible stories, talking about the book of Job, one of the most controversial books of the Bible. And the story goes that God was having a debate with Satan, and Satan taunted God by saying, look at all these people down on earth. They only serve you because you're giving them what they want. And if you took all of that away, they would turn their backs on you in a heartbeat. And God said, no, that's not true. People are good. And Satan said, no, they're not. I can prove it. I'll just take away their stuff and they'll all turn to me instead. And God said, wait a second, look at my servant Job. He wouldn't do that. And the devil challenged him by saying, I'll prove it to you. Give me permission to take everything away from him, and he'll turn his back on you. And the story goes that Job was a good man. He was a God-fearing man. He was successful. He had a family. He had wealth. He had everything. And the devil took everything. The only caveat, the only condition that God put on this deal was that the devil couldn't actually harm Job himself. And the devil killed his children, took all his wealth, destroyed all his goods, and even afflicted him with a disease that didn't actually harm him. It just caused him incredible pain and suffering. And Job fell into a deep depression, as any sane person might, when all these bad things happen. And he cried out and complained loudly and bitterly about the terrible treatment that God had put him through. And his friends all said, just suck it up, you're supposed to be all God-fearing and everything, and it's not for you to challenge the ways of God. And Job did it anyway. He ranted for almost the entire book about how unfair it all was, and how he had spent his life serving God and doing good works and doing everything he was supposed to do, only for this to happen. And the story goes that even his wife told him, just give up, curse God and die. And later, at the end of the story, it goes that the friends who told Job to accept God's will and to just put up with it, and said, well, maybe you did something wrong that you don't even know about, they were the ones who were chastised, and Job was rewarded, even though he had spent the entire book complaining and challenging God's treatment of him, that he was rewarded. And all of his wealth was multiplied many times. He became even wealthier than he was before. He had even more children afterwards than he had before. All of his fortunes completely turned around and skyrocketed and became even more than what they were. And this is one of the books of the Bible that raises more questions than it answers. It's one of the geniuses of the Bible. It asks more questions than it answers, and it leaves them unanswered for people to answer for themselves. That's what makes it great. It doesn't actually tell you point blank why Job was rewarded and his friends were chastised, when he was the one who had been basically challenging God all this time and calling God out for unfair treatment, and that Job didn't deserve any of this, which was true. So recently I did a blog post where I talked about how when a person lacks internal identity, when they lack an internal core of certainty and knowing who they are and what they stand for, that's when people start signing up for identities that come from outside themselves. They start signing up for ideologies, they sign up for religions, they sign up for political movements. They align themselves with any outside source that can give them that identity that they lack internally. They might align themselves with some aspect of their superficial appearance to give them that identity, such as their race or their gender or their sexual orientation or what nationality they belong to. These are all incredibly superficial, meaningless substitutes for an internal core of identity, of knowing exactly who we are, what our lives are about, why we're here, all of that sort of thing. So when someone is out there parading their race, their gender, their ideology for the world to see, if they're wearing a badge and they're using their physical appearance to announce this affiliation to the world, what they're actually announcing is that they don't have this core of identity and they're insecure about it. They're afraid that someone is going to come along and ask, "Who are you really?" And the person's not going to have an answer for that. And that core of identity, that inner knowing of who you are, that nothing can shake that, that's completely separate and individual from everyone around you, and you wouldn't even want to be affiliated with one of these groups because you want to be known for who you are on the inside. And that knowing, that certainty, that individuality and uniqueness and authenticity can only be found by seeking. Every single individual person has to seek that on their own. They have to go through the hard work of rummaging and searching and foraging and mining through their own self to find that. And that is a long, lonely, scary process that can take decades. The true seeker always walks alone. No one can ever do that work for you. But the good news is that there is nothing more pleasing to God than the true seeker. God looks at the true seeker and says, "Look how much this person loves me. Look how much this person desires me. Look how much this person is willing to go through and how much they're willing to suffer just to be in my presence." There is nothing holier in human life than truly, authentically seeking to know oneself and to discover the truth about oneself and to form a true, authentic, individual, personal, one-on-one, intimate connection with our divine source. There could never be anything holier than that. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the book of Job. This is why Job was rewarded in the end. Because Job sought God. He never stopped seeking God. He challenged God. He complained to God. He ranted and raved about how unfair God was and how he didn't deserve this punishment. Job called God on the carpet in front of the world. And he was rewarded for it. Why? Because he sought God. He never stopped seeking to understand God's will and God's way. Job even makes the point, if he had known at any time what God actually wanted for Job to escape this terrible punishment, Job would have done it in a heartbeat. His only desire was to please God and to do what God wanted him to do to serve God and to know God's ways. And this is why he was rewarded. What we need to understand is that questioning God, questioning life, searching for the truth, challenging established conventions, established conventional religion, challenging everything that everybody knows about God, all of that is totally allowed. Not only is it allowed, it's actually required of you. It's required of you to ask those questions, to challenge, to complain about life, and to rant and rave and say it's not fair. That all of that is totally allowed. The point, when Job's wife said, curse God and die, that's exactly what he didn't do. He never cursed God. He never turned away from God. He never renounced God. He never turned to Satan. He always, always, always sought God. He always belonged to God. He always was in God's camp. There was never a single moment in the whole ordeal where God could not point to Job and say and call him my servant Job. That's what God called him. In his original debate with Satan, God called him my servant Job. And Job was always God's servant through the whole thing. He never, ever wavered in that. And that's why he was rewarded. So I hope this video helped somebody. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll continue with our Bible series, talking about Bible stories and what they actually mean. See you next week.